Everybody doing okay tonight? It is getting cold. I noticed everybody getting their wool coats out, and they're about time. Are we good to go? I'm glad you could be here tonight to join us. We've over the last few weeks, we've been enjoying Mike's series on Redwood Faith, and we're going to continue. I'm going to kind of be following the same format that he did. I told him I hadn't ever taught a class that way, but there are a lot of advantages to having some of your teaching portion on video. For one thing, we can make it look a little better and make it flow a little better. It also allows us as teachers to kind of get in everything that we want to say and kind of make sure we hit the points that we want to make without interruption. And then we'll have an opportunity to kind of talk about what we've seen on the video. And so I'm glad you were able to be here tonight, or if you're joining us online on our live stream, we're glad to have you. I will give a warning. If you are following our stream, as you may have noticed, one disadvantage to that is every now and then, if Mike or I use a video clip or audio clip, Facebook is really bad about shutting us down. So if they shut down the audio or a video or something that we show, this is for the people online, because it won't affect you in here, but you may lose that feed for a little while. Hopefully it'll come back, unless they put us in, what'd you call that, Pete? Facebook jail, because sometimes you get put in Facebook jail for this. But we're going to be, for 4 weeks, we're going to study through the first 2 chapters of the book of Luke regarding the birth of Jesus. And we're going to begin, if you want to join in reading, it's going to be on the screen as well. We'll begin in Luke chapter 1, verse 1. And where we see Luke introduce this and address his comments to his audience, his immediate audience, which is Theophilus. Luke chapter 1. Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. In the time of Herod the king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Once, when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as a priest before God, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. And then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." Zechariah asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I am an old man, and my wife is well along in years." The angel said to him, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he stayed so long in the temple. When he came out, he could not speak to them. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them, but remained unable to speak. When his time of service was completed, he returned home. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant, and for 5 months remained in seclusion. "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "In these days he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people." That's a longer text than we normally use, but what a rich story. There's so much that we could dive into in this story. But we're going to focus on a single thought, from a single larger thought from all of this. So let's watch the video together, and then we'll have some time to discuss what we are seeing. I really love this time of year. I love buying gifts for my family and friends, and I'll admit it, I don't mind receiving a gift or two. But the connections to family and the connections to friends are what really bless me at Christmas. This is a holiday season that almost everyone celebrates on some level, whether as a secular holiday or as a time to remember and to celebrate the birth of Jesus. And that's okay. The Apostle Paul said in Romans 14, 5 and 6, one person considers one day more sacred than another. Another considers every day alike. He said each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. Whoever regards one day as special does so to the Lord. So this month we are going to take this time to reflect on the coming of Jesus, his coming to earth at his birth, and his coming again to receive us unto himself. There's a word for this time of joyful expectation, one we haven't used very much in our tradition: Advent. Advent is the time of year roughly from Thanksgiving to Christmas Day, and it focuses on themes of longing and expectation. And the first theme is hope. In the great film, The Shawshank Redemption, which I'm sure most of you have seen because it's on TV somewhere every night. In that movie, Tim Robbins plays Andy Dufresne, a mild-mannered banker wrongly convicted of murder. In the midst of the prison life, in the midst of the violence and the murder and the corruption, Andy is able to maintain his sanity and his dignity, all while taking 20 years to tunnel out of the prison and gain his freedom. This story introduced us to the phrase, "get busy living" or "get busy dying." And it is hope that keeps Andy busy.
Forget that there are places in the world that aren't made out of stone, that there's something inside that they can't get to, that they can't touch. It's yours.
What are you talking about?
Hope.
Hope. Let me tell you something, my friend. Hope is a dangerous thing. Hope can drive a man insane. It's got no use on the inside. You better get used to that idea.
Like Brooks did? Dear Red, if you're reading this, you've gotten out. And if you've come this far, maybe you're willing to come a little further. You remember the name of the town, don't you?
Zihuatanejo.
I could use a good man to help me get my project on wheels. I'll keep an eye out for you, and the chessboard ready. Remember, Red, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. I will be hoping that this letter finds you, and finds you well. Your friend, Andy.
Get busy living or get busy dying. For the second time in my life, I'm guilty of committing a crime. Parole violation. Of course, I doubt they'll toss up any roadblocks for that. Not for an old crook like me. Fort Hancock, Texas, please. I find I'm so excited I can barely sit still or hold a thought in my head. I think it's the excitement only a free man can feel. A free man at the start of a long journey whose conclusion is uncertain. I hope I can make it across the border. I hope to see my friend and shake his hand. I hope the Pacific is as blue as it has been in my dreams. I hope.
Life often doesn't turn out like we expect. Sometimes it turns out better than expected. And if I challenged you to think about the surprise joys you've experienced in your life, I'm sure you could name at least a few. But sometimes life goes the other way. Parts of our lives can be marked by unexpected loss. The unexpected loss of a job, the unexpected loss of a marriage, the unexpected loss of a business. And in all those instances, what began in hope ended in disappointment. It's possible that unexpected failures and disappointments and letdowns come to mind more easily sometimes than the unexpected blessings. The hurts of life can sometimes keep us from moving ahead and experiencing life to the fullest. And I know that there are some here today who are listening or present who can identify with the family that we're going to talk about today. Few things in life are as challenging as when a couple deeply desires children, but they're unable to conceive. Where there was once hope, it has faded away. Zachariah and Elizabeth's life wasn't turning out like they had hoped. They were childless. And not only are they childless, Elizabeth is barren. They have no children, and there's no hope of future children because they are old. Elizabeth's season for childbearing has passed. Childless, barren, and old. Some of you can identify with that. You know the pain of that disappointment. And yet, while some of us certainly can identify with this family more than others, none of us can really truly capture the shame and despair of a barren woman in first century Jewish culture. Her deepest, most meaningful role has been stripped away by an inability of her body. She is unable, in her view, to do what women were designed to do. The emptiness of her womb is surpassed only by the emptiness of her spirit. Empty spirits are all around us. We work with people who have empty spirits. We're married to people who have empty spirits. We parent children who have empty spirits. And if we are honest, we are empty spirits, at least from time to time. But here's some good news. Emptiness is not the last word. And while Advent does not ignore emptiness, neither is it about emptiness. It is about the fullness of time when Jesus first came. It is about the fullness of time as we prepare in hope for when Jesus, the source of hope, comes again. This story can help us do just that. Each person in here has experienced an unfulfilled hope of some kind, but we are each offered a new source of hope in this season. Zechariah was not prepared when this great news of joy came his way because his hope was gone. Interestingly, his son's role would be to prepare a people, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. And perhaps we could say his role was to inspire hope. And as a result, we can learn how to hope from this story as we prepare for Jesus' second coming. And we know that our hope is not in vain because Jesus has already come. So today, we can re-experience the hope the message gives and be renewed in the hope that the Advent season inspires. And first of all, to be renewed in hope, we must first recognize our fears. When the angel first came to Zechariah, he was gripped with fear. But the angel wants Zechariah to know that his prayer has been answered. Don't be afraid. Take heart. It's important to note that Zechariah is not challenged or condemned on being afraid. His fear is natural. His fear is expected. It's reasonable. And yet his fear dictates the first words of the angel, do not be afraid. Before the angel can move into the essence of the good news that Zechariah is about to hear, he must address Zechariah's fear. The question is not whether or not we will be afraid. It is whether we will fear truly. In The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis, a young boy named Eustace seems to have no fear. It's not that he is fearless with courage, but that he lacks dread or a sense of awe. Jonathan Rogers in The World According to Narnia points out that finally, in the presence of Aslan, Eustace develops a sense of fear that indicates awe. Are your fears based in awe, in the awe and the dread of God? All other fears, while meaningful and even important, are dimmed and decreased as we anticipate the coming of the Lord. Once we recognize our fears against the greatness of God, our hope is renewed. Secondly, to be renewed in hope, we must act in faith. Fear is not Zechariah's final response to the angel's words. Unlike Jesus, John the Baptist is not conceived by the Holy Spirit. He is conceived by Zechariah out of faith. So let's read between the lines a little bit. Zechariah has been away on service in the temple, and when he returns home, he does not delay. He risks opening his heart once again to the hope of pregnancy, and he has relations with his wife. He does not let fear of disappointment rule his life. He responds in faith. As we prepare for the Lord's return, we can strengthen our hope by acting in faith, in line with the Lord's ongoing mission. We can participate in the Lord's mission by giving water in his name. We can participate in the Lord's mission by offering prayer in his name. We can participate in the Lord's mission by welcoming guests into our homes and strangers into our church in his name. We can do all of this with great joy, and it will build our hope. What would give you great joy that lines up with God's mission in Christ? Is it possible God wants you to respond in faith? Because as we respond in faith, our hope will grow. Thirdly, to be renewed in hope, we need to reject unhealthy shame. Elizabeth's barrenness is her disgrace. She's unable to bear children, to bring a source of honor into their home. This is not an illness or a condition that only she knows about. It's public, something everyone knows, not like a secret addiction or something that she manages privately. It's a public affair. Think of seeing your darkest secret go viral on the internet without any recourse to correct it or stop it or dispel the rumors, not only because the word is out, but because, well, it's true. Elizabeth is barren. Everyone knows. And she is disgraced. But in the face of this shame, she experiences the glory of the Lord as her own glory is restored. In becoming pregnant, she is no longer barren. She is no longer disgraced. She is graced. Graced by God. Imagine the reaction of the neighbors now. Her filled womb fills conversations with life and chatter. The grace shown to Elizabeth brought her joy, a joy that she made public, but not immediately. Luke tells us that she waited 5 months in seclusion. Just as with any pregnancy, there are various timelines. Some people announce that they're expecting a baby right away. Others wait until the end of the first trimester. But after 5 months, Elizabeth is finally willing to make her joy known. And perhaps she feared a failed pregnancy would result in even greater shame. Whatever the reason and whatever the timing, Elizabeth's public appearance took courage. At some point in her journey, she had to reject the shame of her previous barrenness and display the grace of God now on display in her body. She finally rejected an unfounded social shame by pronouncing her pregnancy publicly. Is there something that you're tempted to keep hidden because of fear or shame? What has God done in your life that has taken away shame and given you hope for greater things? What will the Lord reveal for everyone when he returns that you can reveal even now? Hope can be fragile, but it is not meant to be hidden. Hope is public. Hope can hardly be contained. Finally, to be renewed in hope, we need to embrace the grace. Elizabeth was graced by God. Did you know that you're graced by God too? That he favors you, just like he favored Zechariah and Elizabeth? God could have chosen another way to begin the process of Jesus' birth announcement. The birth of John the Baptist is not of necessity, but it is of sheer grace. Grace shown to Zechariah and Elizabeth. Likewise, the gift of Jesus is not necessity, but sheer grace. Grace shown to you. We all face a similar challenge to Zechariah and Elizabeth. We face the disgrace of our previous lives, previous habits, previous attitudes, previous failures. We have prayers that we wonder if God hears, hopes that we thought should have been realized by now. You may even be someone praying for a child. But remember this. It was not John the Baptist who is the ultimate source of Zechariah and Elizabeth's joy. The ultimate joy of their lives would be in the one whose birth would follow John's. Jesus is the ultimate joy. We might hope for many things, but our deepest longing, our deepest hope is fulfilled in Jesus. And He is here for you. He's here for you today, and He's on His way to be undeniably present. The grace of Jesus has made a real difference in our lives. Jesus can change you. Will you embrace His grace? Will you embrace hope?
As I mentioned at the beginning, this is such a rich text, such a rich story, a rich narrative. There are so many. One of the last times I read through this in preparing for tonight for this class, I picked up on something I hadn't noticed before. The very smart language that Zechariah uses when talking to the angel. Did you notice he says, "I am old and my wife is advanced in years"? He was a pretty smart guy. Careful about how he talked about his wife. Recognize your fear. Act in faith. Reject unhealthy shame. And embrace the grace. Those are ways that we can renew hope, as we talked about. So let's spend just a little time kind of diving into some of these things and some of these ideas and some of the thoughts from the video, and share with each other, and in a time of communal learning. Elizabeth kept this secret. Now, this is a big secret to keep, isn't it? She kept her secret for 5 months. That's a hard secret to keep for 5 months. Y'all know I'm a new grandpa. Hadn't settled yet on what he should call me. I'm thinking about G-Man. Kim wants to be Gigi. I think I'll be G-Man. And Levi and Anna waited till near the end of the first trimester to tell us. But she keeps this secret for 5 months. Elizabeth does. What about your faith? What is it about your faith that you have kept hidden? Is there anything about your faith, about your walk with God, that you keep completely hidden, or maybe that you keep hidden from certain people? And how might we see that played out in our lives, in our daily lives? Well, let's start with this. Why might you keep your faith hidden? A risk of exposure to Right, right. What are some of the things we may risk with making our faith more public than we do? What are some of those risks? Judgment. Being held to a higher standard. Right. Holier than thou. Don't want to be viewed as holier than thou. Ooh. Something that you didn't study on, so somebody might ask you a tough question. I think that's pretty common. We do, there is a certain, you notice almost all of these things are rooted in some level of fear. Almost all of them are rooted in some level of fear. I think there's a whole lot in these lessons that we'll see about fear. In fact, next week we'll talk about fear quite a bit. But here, even in the beginning, we see the fear in Zechariah when this news first comes to him. And we can understand because we experience fear in our lives. And so often that's about faith. So often, for so many, it is really easy for us to keep that a private part of our life. That our faith becomes a private thing. It becomes a closely held thing. When, what should it be? What should our faith be? It should be evident. Right. Oh, and we've had a lot of good input here on what those things might be, and how do we overcome those? How do we overcome those fears of exposure, fears of being accused of being a hypocrite, being accused of being holier than thou, of not being afraid to have to address questions that are too tough for us to answer? Very. You're talking about like Western culture? Not very demonstrative. To say the least, we are at times not very demonstrative. Mm-hmm. Right. That's actually a great tension to possess in our lives. Part not necessarily having all the answers and being able to say, I don't have all the answers. Good man. Good man. Yeah. Mhm. Absolutely. I agree with you, and I agree with Amy. We're all in agreement here. Lots. Hmm. That's a really good contrast. Doesn't seem to be near the level of trepidation and doubt. And yeah, that's a really good contrast to make between Elizabeth and Mary. Um, Childlike faith versus, because she was, we'll talk about that in the next couple of weeks, she was a child. She was a child. Yes, right. Yeah. I will throw just a personal observation here. I've always loved the story of Zechariah and Elizabeth, because it so much of it kind of mirrored what Kim and I went through early in our marriage, when we wanted to have children and we didn't, and we didn't, and we didn't, and long story short, Kim went to the doctor to talk about fertility issues, and she was pregnant when she got there. He said, "Any chance you're pregnant?" She said, "No, no." And she was. And then when Levi was little, when he was a toddler, he began to pray every night for a baby brother or sister. And it was tough, because, again, we were in a position where it wasn't happening. Mama, God, please give me a little baby brother or baby sister. Either one, I don't care. I'll help take care of it. I'll love it. And it became heartbreaking. Second trip to the doctor. And this time they ran more extensive tests. And because of an infection that had happened when we first married, Kim had a blockage. And the doctor said, "You are not going to get pregnant again, and we cannot understand how you got pregnant the first time, because the scar tissue that's causing the blockage is older than Levi." That was such a moving thing for us, and still heartbreaking, because Levi was so passionate about having a baby brother or sister. So while we did have the one child, we can understand, I can really identify with the struggle that Zechariah and Elizabeth have, even outside that culture. And as I mentioned in the video, and we can't begin to understand what it meant in this culture. How might your hope be strengthened by sharing a change that God has brought about in your life? That story I just told you, that's an example in my life. And now, about fell. And now it's all kind of coming full circle, and we have this little baby grandchild. How might your hope be strengthened? By sharing with someone else, by sharing it, a change that God has brought about in your life. we never know how that witness of testimony regarding our own life can impact someone else's life, but at the same time impact us as we tell, as we share, as we repeat. I think the hope, don't you think that hope, sense of hope can begin to be reinforced as we share and open up ourselves to others, our experiences, then we are reinforcing hope in our own lives. They might have 5 children. I can tell you 2 weeks ago she said they ain't having no more. I think so. I think she'll get over that. It's going to really happen. And that's such that story is so beautiful, and it really is a movie about hope. And those last 2 words, as the camera pans over the ocean, were, "I hope." It's a beautiful story and a beautiful thing to learn about hope. Probably most of us have been in a situation before that felt hopeless. And maybe somebody has shared it with you in a way that generated hope in you, so that you were able to say, I can get through this. I can and hope, hope is a funny word. Hope is a very contextual word, but we can use it a lot of different ways. We can use it to mean basically a wish. But in the context of our lives, hope is assurance. The hope that we have in Christ is assurance, not a wish. Zechariah took steps of faith in cooperation with God that led to Elizabeth's pregnancy. What steps of faith do you think that God may be calling you to take? And what new steps of faith? We ain't gotten there yet. Well, I think it works for both. I was not discounting the spiritual aspect. To teach us. Absolutely. They had no hope of pregnancy. In their case, outside, absolutely, I see what you mean. But they still, if their heart is right, they still got spiritual hope. And that's the thing that we have to be blessed with today. The most important thing in my life is my everlasting life. Yeah. Right. And if I get twisted, I guess, I don't know if that's the word I want to use or not either, but if I get to where I'm thinking of physical world, what am I going to leave with that? That maybe I'm pushing it a little bit too far. Well, like I said, we're getting there. It's kind of using these examples, but we talked about John being a source of hope for Christ, Christ being a source of hope for us all. Mike. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. It's dealing with these things. Yeah. I think they are. I think they are interrelated and allegorical and parabolic. I don't think that's a word, but mhm, mhm, mhm. Well, and that's where responding in faith becomes so important in our lives, whatever's going on in our lives, whether it's childbearing, whether it's parenting, whether it's grandparenting, or any of the other things that are part of our day-to-day life. How important is it to respond in faith? How important is it to take hold of the promises of God and partner with God? Isn't that what we're called to do? In a way, partner with God in His mission. We talked about Zechariah being in mission with God, on mission with God. Responding in faith is a big part of how we handle any aspect of our life. How do we respond to that thing in that moment in faith? How do we respond in faith, whatever the circumstance? And there is a lot of tension there. There's a lot of I don't know. There's a lot of I'm struggling just as much as you are. There's a lot of these things because we do share the journey. We share remarkably similar journeys, don't we? The details may be different, but our journeys are remarkably similar. So much of this, of course, not knowing this was unintended, speaks to the current tragedy in our community. So hard for us to, or impossible for us to see and to know people's hearts, to see and to know their struggle, to see and to know their emptiness that I talked about in the video. There are empty people all around us. And sometimes we are empty spirits. And so, responding in faith is simply, to put it in its simplest terms, the best path forward. The next, what is it that John Coleman is always telling us? Do the what? The next right thing. Do the next right thing. And living a life of faith in response to struggles. Living a life of faith in response to tragedy. Living a life of faith in response to all of these worldly things, earthly things that can drag us down sometimes, becomes all that much more important. So one more question. I'm going to skip a couple here. Zechariah's fear showed that he was unprepared to get a word from God, this particular from God anyway. How might you better prepare yourself to follow God's lead in new ways? Now, I'm not talking about the stuff you've always done. I'm not talking about the going to church and being here for Sunday school and being here, the routines and patterns that we get into in our spiritual life, because our spiritual life is supposed to be so much more than those things. So how do we prepare ourselves to follow God in new ways? In ways that we never have before. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is outside their experience, that's right. Faith. And realizing how God, no matter the circumstances, is working for the good. Working for the good in our lives. And we could, like I said, this is such a rich story and a rich text. We could talk for a long time about it, and we could talk about these ideas for so long. But we're going to stop there for tonight. We'll be back next week. A little bit of a schedule change. There will not be a praise night for December, at the beginning of December, like we usually do. We're going to go through this series, and we're looking, still don't have details, but we're looking at something toward the new year for a special praise time. So we'll be talking about that as we go. We're going to have some announcements, and then Kenny, if you would dismiss us with a prayer. Oh, I thought you had some announcements. I don't have any.